All right, everyone, welcome to the Thursday, January 28th, 2021 Police Reform and Reinvention Collaborative Committee for the town of Newcastle. Before we start, I just want to ask also everyone to just the first time you speak, just identify yourself and make sure you have your names up on the screen so that those viewers at home can know who's speaking and know who we are. Obviously, we had a lot of stuff that we went through last time and didn't even get to complete it, but everyone was tasked with some sort of job. So what I'd like to do before we even hit that point, though, is what did I just do with it? I apologize. I will just get into it. So I just ask that you identify yourself before you speak. And why don't we go and start with the review of the topics that we all had assignments to handle. Unless there's anything else that someone wants to bring up before we start.
Jeremy, are you saying that we should like Vince Canziani every time I speak?
No, just the first time you speak.
Okay.
Just for
so we nominate Vince to start.
Can I just ask one question?
Yeah.
I just have one question. Kimberly Carey.
Yes, go. You've done it. Go ahead.
Question is, has the survey actually been distributed yet?
Yes, it's been
It
launched.
was. Okay. I just wanted to confirm. That's all. Thanks.
All right, I'm going to my cheat sheet, which I can't find it all of a sudden. So bear with me. I apologize. I have too many things that are open.
By the way, I thought everybody did a really good job on the documents. I thought they were very, with some just minor tinkering. I think people really just hit the nail right on the head with everything. So,
Oh, this is good.
that's my personal opinion on it. Oh, I'm sorry, Martha Jacobs. My personal opinion, anyway.
I should start and say I'm Jeremy Saland. So let's just get rolling. Vince, I think you actually have the first topic. If we're going to just go that way, if no one has anything to add in terms of any old business.
Oops.
All right. So seeing no hands. So Vince, do you want to take off and start with what you prepared and what you addressed?
Yeah, so I was responsible to come up with some language on recommendations for improved mental health emergency responses. And so I set up a time to meet with the chief because I thought that it was important to get more information about what there's already happening. And it turns out like what I just, my take on it was there's a fair amount of procedures in place that help make a response to a mental health emergency run better. So there's a lot to work with already. And then there were a couple of things that we talked about, and I added my de-escalation history with emotionally disturbed children that I have from that perspective to come up with these thoughts. Now, this is, of course, like I think this is a prototype. And so if it doesn't hit the mark, it's fine. It's all up for discussion. So that was kind of the process. We talked, and then I came up with a sort of this idea of what would be good guidelines for the police officers. How do you want to proceed? Do you want to?
Well, maybe you can
take questions, or what do you want to?
I don't know if everyone had a chance to review it, but certainly we can all ask if anyone has any questions, but maybe you can just hit on some of the highlighted areas.
Okay.
Paraphrase.
Okay, so the idea was first to set the context of what the purpose from the police services position is when they go to a mental health emergency. And so the first thing is they are tasked with maintaining the health and safety of not only the person who's in distress, but also everybody around them. So that was one big thing to say up front, that is an important directive that they're operating under. That was one. But number two was the thing, and this came from the chief, that the police want to be as helpful as possible. And I thought that concept, be as helpful as possible, was a good guide, that's what you're there to be, is helpful and not necessarily enforcing. That was a big difference that I thought. So that was something I wrote in there. And then I defined what helpfulness means. So if they're going to be helpful, assessing the threat immediately for safety, because that is really important. Like what if somebody is having a breakdown of some kind and there are weapons in the house. Now that is something police officers need to know right away because they want to protect themselves and everybody. So that's important. But also calming the situation down and de-escalating it. That's what helpfulness means. Creating an atmosphere of safety and care. Assessing and learning about the triggers for the emergency and moving away from the triggers. One of the things that we always do when we're working with people in distress in social work is we call it cut the stimulation. So if I have somebody who's like an autistic child who's like angry and flipping out, everybody leaves the room, we turn the lights off and nobody says anything. We cut all the energy. So that was like an idea to move away from whatever is creating the thing. Mobilizing mental health, medical and social assets. Social assets mean, is there somebody who really has a relationship with this individual who could help? Like that would be an example of a social asset. And keeping in mind that people are more important than property. And that is one of the things that I said that specifically because in working with somebody who's in distress, they may be doing property damage. And in the work that I do, when a kid is doing property damage, I don't care. The property can be repaired. The kid can't. So that's something I put in there for discussion. It may or may not be workable, but I always say that the people are more important than the property. Property can, we can get new stuff. I'm not worried about that. So that was a definition of helpfulness. There were some specific policies that the chief had that I thought were really great. Like they don't have to feel any time pressure. They take as much time as they need. That is a big deal when you're dealing with an emotional upset. You're not on a clock. I gotta listen, I gotta go to another call. No, I'm here to do this. I'm here as long as it takes. And that is a big guide for this kind of work. That 2 police officers will go and not 1. So one can hang back and watch or keep the place safe while the other one is doing the primary intervention. That's a big deal that two officers would go. And that they have access 24/7 to the Department of Community Mental Health. This is already set up. They can call and speak on the phone to a professional to get guidance. That's already in place. So good thing. And the use of force is a last resort, and only in a life-threatening situation. So if somebody is breaking, a table, to me, that's not a life-threatening situation. Break the table. I don't care about that.
I just might have to clarify that a little bit, Vince. If we determine that this person is a danger to themselves or other, and they don't go voluntarily, force might need to be used. So I don't know if that's saying life-threatening. So.
Right. And so that's what I want that discussion. Like, so when, and that's an important thing. So when does the police officer, because they have to think on their feet, when do they have to restrain the individual physically? When is that moment? And what goes into that decision?
Yeah, it would be, after they've determined that they are a danger to themselves and others, and all other attempts to get them to go voluntarily have failed. Now, the old idea is always to use the minimum amount of force necessary, but force may need to be used. It doesn't mean not deadly physical force, but force may need to be used.
So let's say just is in the definition, like how is that explained in the training of police officers that this is a life-threatening situation? What are they looking for? A weapon? Is a person trying to cut their wrists or something? Like they have to be doing something overt? Or if somebody has a baseball bat in their hands and they're pounding it on the ground, is that life-threatening just because they have a baseball bat in their hands?
If they're pounding on the ground, not necessarily, but if they're, holding it against somebody else or threatening to use it against somebody else. So, that's the danger.
So that's the thing right there. So and I've seen this happen, a kid is threatening to swing a baseball bat, but everybody is not within the area where the baseball bat is being swung. They can't hit anybody with it, but they have it and they say, I'm gonna hit you with it, let's say, but they can't because they're too far away. What then?
You have to take the totality of each situation, as fluid, right? But if you're saying that they were holding a baseball bat and they were threatening to use it against somebody, would I think they're endangering themselves and somebody else? It certainly seems like it, but we're not gonna, it's a kid, right? You're not gonna just rush in and try to take it from them, or you're not gonna, shoot them at that time. There's de-escalation, right? That would be the next step, and talking
Right.
them down, and maybe the mental health professional or a family member. I mean, there's just anything you can to get through it.
Can I jump in one question? Because Vince is saying, if I'm hearing it right, Vince is saying life threatening, and you're saying, Chief, a danger to someone else, which are two distinct levels and issues.
Right.
So I think arguably the question, not arguably, but maybe Vince, the better question would be not necessarily life threatening, but when is danger? What is the definition of danger? How far does that go before that step is taken? It seems to be you're referencing it as life threatening, unless I'm misunderstanding.
Yeah, they're two totally separate issues. Right. Somebody who's actually use of force last resort in life-threatening situations. Okay, great. That's one aspect. The other one is use of force when we deem that we have to take somebody in custody under the mental health law. Well, it may become necessary to use force, and force might be, just taking him into control of him and handcuff him, and then call for an ambulance and get him on a stretcher, and the officer would assist him, that way, or accompany them to the hospital.
Yeah, and I think that this sort of ties into the next part is like, and that's the other resource that the police have, which is you have two police officers trained. They went to a train the trainer week-long de-escalation training, and these are people on staff who can then train the rest of the police officers, but also the debriefing of an incident, because there's a lot of judgment involved in what we're talking about in the situation. What's danger, what's not, what's life-threatening. The police officers have to think on their feet, and they have to make these decisions, and they may make a really great one and they may make a poor one. But one of the things in this was make sure we talk about what happened to improve, because there are a million different ways these things can go. Did that make sense?
I mean, can I just say, and while Vince's example involved a child, this may involve somebody other than a child. And is the threshold going to be different when you're dealing with an adult who still has issues? And I think that's a real concern. And then by extension, one of the main reasons why we're here to begin with, does the whole scenario change when the person is an adult and a member of the BIPOC community? I know we don't necessarily want to ask that particular question because it sounds kind of distasteful, but I think it's something we need to address.
Yeah, and actually in the assessment section, there was a kind of an oblique way of talking about it. But when the police officer is coming to a house, and let's say there is somebody who can give them some information, finding out what this person's experience of police is before could be part of that. Like, to say, if you can get that information. Now, I think I'm going to ask, the chief, in these situations as we know them, are police officers able to get information to help assess the problem from the people that called them? Does that happen?
Sure.
They expect that.
I mean,
They can
sometimes,
expect it.
right? Sometimes, but not always, right?
Not always. Yeah. So I listed there in the assessment, find out what the triggers are, what loud noises, or one of the triggers could be previous experience with police. And if they know that the individuals had bad experience with police, you should know that before you go in and talk to them, because they're going to be on edge already. And it may be that that's a reason to have EMS doing the talking while the police officer is in the background backing them up, if the police officer is a trigger themselves to this.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you should raise that, but EMS doesn't really want to be the first people in.
Not the first, but let's say
You said that the EMS would be first and the police will be behind them. but
No,
they-
the one doing the talking.
I've never witnessed that. They
They don't want to do that.
They don't wanna do
They
that.
don't want to do that.
Yeah,
And-
It's always the police officer.
Right, and I think it sort of begs the question as to what kind of situation are they walking into? And that's why, although, and Chief, just correct me if I'm wrong or not. So officers do currently have access 24/7 to, and I know this isn't the right, but they have it to mental health services support through the county, is my understanding.
Department of Community Mental Health.
Okay, but because of the pandemic, we only have it virtually, is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And I don't know that was going to change either way.
Oh, okay,
the
that
pandemic
was my question too.
No,
Is whether or not it's unique to the pandemic, so the officer can virtually, speak to somebody, FaceTime, pick up a phone, but, you can't put an iPad in front of somebody with their mental health professional, say, here, talk to the iPad sort of thing.
It started
That's
during
not
the
gonna cut it.
pandemic and everybody's like, this is a great idea. Let's
Yeah.
keep it and keep it going. So
So in the recommendations that, to the county and this discussion of creating these pods, was the idea that we were going to have access to a live person that would be available to respond along with the police to one of these mental health.
Can I jump in here,
crises?
Jill?
Please, Harvey.
Harvey Loeb. I heard County Executive Latimer speak Tuesday night in Tarrytown. I'm also part of that group. And he said, yes, and to answer your question, yes, they expect to have crisis response teams. He said something's going to be forthcoming, didn't put forth any details. And I've heard from Mark Giuliano, who's kind of the point person for the Department of Community Mental Health. And he sort of indicated once the COVID crisis is over, they will respond in person. There will be some sort of in-person response from the crisis team.
Mark's actually our backup. Chief Carroll, I'm sorry, I didn't know if I identified myself earlier.
I'm done, Chief.
Oh, yeah. Mark Giuliani actually is our backup liaison. So we have a primary and he's a second. So.
And so with this, when this happens, then there's still going to be the police officer's going to get there first, and then maybe call for this help, or the help is coming at the same time. But it's good. I would think that the response team may just take longer to get there.
Well, that was the whole idea, is that there was supposed to be a pod that was located in like Mount Kisco,
Okay.
Newcastle, North Castle, almost the way we do WEMS, where we've got, a consortium and there's a fly car that is strategically located so that they can respond quickly to these events, so that they're not being dispatched out of Rye or White Plains or
So regional
somewhere south
location.
of, exactly. And that was the whole idea, because we really need them on scene.
Pretty
And the
quickly.
police, the police need them to be present with them. And I don't think, I'm thrilled that we have officers that are trained. And I think training the trainer has been really successful for the police department. I know that our town hall staff has taken advantage of it. It's a terrific program, but I don't think anything substitutes for having a dedicated mental health professional that can walk in and just assist us.
Can I just, Joanna and I, can I just jump in? Because I'm just, from what I'm gathering, and going back to what Vince said, sometimes you're walking into an already hostile environment and situation, or an aggressive situation. And I'm just wondering how we can help diffuse those kind of situations. So what would one say to, like, if you have, like, yes, the police do show up first, but they don't show up in uniform. What if they showed up, they were like plainclothes policemen? So would that like make, the situation seem a little bit more friendly? Because I've seen both in the city as well as locally, when the police do show up to these type of situations, along with them comes their uniform, which comes with a stigma as well, especially if you're a Black man. So I'm just wondering if, showing up in plain clothes, yes, the police are there, but it's also not as aggressive.
So the first, we dispatch patrol officers because they're on the road and their ability to be able to respond first to it. And they can get there quicker. I don't have detectives working 24/7 as well. And, I wouldn't object to a detective, going on a call like that to assist at all. But, you're going to get a uniform officer first. Because what if they are a true danger to themselves, and we delay the response and then something happens. So we really are there to help and try to make things better.
But let me just say, so again, thinking on their feet, let's say a police officer comes in and recognizes exactly what Joanna said and said, to the person there, can you give me your coat so I could just put this over so I look less like a cop? If a police officer did that, would that be considered inappropriate or
Definitely
okay? Or
Definitely not. Definitely not. Whatever it takes. I can tell you, I don't want to embarrass him, but FDO Davenport is one of the best at de-escalation I've seen. And I'd love to ask him how many people he's been able to talk voluntarily, because I bet there's very few that actually he's had to use force with. So anything's on the table, right? To try to make it resolved peacefully.
And see, this is exactly what I was hoping you would say, because so you have an internal resource of somebody who knows, who's got some skills in this that could really, is he one of your de-escalator train the trainer guys? Is that
He's not, but he's a field training officer. So he trains newer officers.
Right. And so you got all this asset to help with, you could do this, you could do this. These are the things you can do. You can, like Joanna, throw a jacket over yourself and make yourself look less threatening to the individual, that would be okay. So that they would know what kind of things they could do.
Well, may I suggest and I don't want to get in trouble, especially with the Reverend Dr. Martha Jacobs, by pushing anyone too quickly. I'm still reeling from that first time. But I think those are good examples. We're getting so caught into the small minutia of it. And I think we should look at a little bit from a higher view, so that we can make future suggestions, because we could argue this, or not argue it. We can discuss it back and forth for hours. And unfortunately, we don't have that much time. So I think maybe just the bigger picture.
I can also tell you another resource the police department has used is me. I have gone on at least one, if not more, calls with the police when they've had to make difficult notifications to families. And that helps to diffuse the situation as well. So that's another resource that I know the chief has at his disposal. So, I think that there are several other people in the community perhaps that could also be tapped if needed. But anyway, that's just another FYI.
Other members of the clergy, or just other denominations, or just you?
No, I'm just suggesting Vin. I mean, we know, for example, it would seem like if there were a child who was going crazy, or that Vince might be a good resource to kind of call and say, can you come and help us?
That's an excellent idea, Vince. Is that something you'd be willing to do?
Yeah, particularly if they're autistic. Yeah, I know that population really well.
So, I think that there are people with skills in our community who would be willing to say, you know what, chief, if this happens, if you need somebody to talk somebody down off of something, I'm the person you can call. If I can't come, I won't come. But, I can be there to assist it. And I think that helping community is a really good way also of kind of diffusing situations when possible. I didn't even realize that the person that I went with 2 officers for a year later pulled me aside at an event and said, you may not remember me, but I'm the person who you came to the house with the police, and I can't tell you what a difference that made for me having you there. And so I think that if we tap into our community resources, I think that could be really helpful.
I think that's a great idea. If we have a resource list, I think, it would be awesome if we could just make use of so many talented people we have. It would bring a more humane approach to an already, horrible situation.
Yeah. So I'll just add that as a recommendation, is to explore existing community resources who would be willing to volunteer to help defuse situations that they're well suited for, maybe.
Vince, could I impose, I'm sorry, Jill Shapiro. Could I impose upon you to resubmit this, even by the end of the meeting, just with that suggestion and also correcting the name of the,
Yeah, sure.
what is the proper name of
It's the proper name is Department of Community Mental Health.
Community Mental Health? Is that all right if we do that? Tiffany, will you keep track of that with me? Just so that we have, because ultimately, I think part of the goal for tonight is to start putting recommendations in a shape that we can take and present them to the public for our public hearing. And so I'd like, whatever little tweaks that we're making to like this sort of policy to be able to be forward, and certainly putting the right department name on it would be great. And that's a fabulous suggestion about the additional people in the community. So.
Does that include the Vince, you had mentioned a little bit earlier, going back to triggers, et cetera. You'd add the language in there regarding prior police experience,
Yeah,
prior experience with the police as a possible trigger.
It
Just
says it's
to be-
provocative relationships.
Yeah.
It's in there, I think, but I'll look over
Oh,
it.
I thought you wanted to kind of segregate that out a little bit because all right, I just don't know if people are going to consider that just from that phrase. I don't know.
Okay.
But because you had mentioned it to clarify it. So if we needed clarification on that, I would imagine the recommendation would need clarification,
Yeah.
but maybe I'm wrong.
No, it's all right. I'll look it over and we can do that. So there was one thing, like Chief, you mentioned that the role play simulator. I wasn't so clear that you have that role play simulator. That was around whether to discharge your weapon or not, to shoot. Is there one that has to do with these kinds of situations, or is that not really true? You're muted.
Last year, 2019, we sent officers to a simulator training where we have two instructors, we have somebody work in the simulator, and they have to walk into scenarios. It could be a mental health case, it could be a domestic, it could be a bank robbery, it could be anything. And they're dealing with, again, fluid situation. And depending on how they react, we have the ability to escalate or de-escalate the situation, where it may start as it could have been use of force right away, and they talked it out of him, and they talked it back by de-escalation, or vice versa. So it's a good training tool.
And so I just want, as a resource, that continues to be so, and it can be used for domestic violence, mental health, aggressive, any of those things.
Yes, all kinds of law enforcement scenarios.
Okay.
It's usually not like an alarm. It's usually not a simple one. Like if it's an alarm call, it ends up escalating to maybe a burglary, but it's just an opportunity to get some guys experience under trainers and supervisors.
Okay.
Can
I don't know.
I'm sorry, just one more quick thing
Good.
is that Tiffany actually wasn't part of the chain on the distribution. I just went through the list. I mean, there's only like 18 people on your chain. Can everyone just make sure that Tiffany's included, because she's helping me to sort of, correlate all the recommendations, and we just want to make sure we don't miss anybody's. So thank you.
Okay. Are there any, we can kind of move this forward to kind of keep our time. The recommendations for the Newcastle Police Department or for the Westchester County Services, did anybody have any thoughts about those? Were they fine? Or did anything need to be refined that we haven't already talked about?
I just think that, we have both suburbs and city. So while a lot of the recommendations are more geared towards suburbs, maybe we could, because we are like making recommendations for, the entire force. So if we could just gear it to sound more city-like as well, because I think maybe, we need to be making recommendations for the city aspect, which is why I know I'm pushing back and I know I'm going back, which is why, when I was talking about the plainclothes policemen, yes, I was thinking about Chappaqua, but I was also thinking about a more city-like presence, because it's definitely handled a lot differently than it would be handled in suburbia.
So, because this is the way this is worded is recommendations for the Newcastle Police Department. And then is that another level? Like you would say to make sure that it is more broad. The recommendations for Westchester County services.
Yes.
More broad. Okay.
Chief, you had mentioned last week you had a set of, you were looking at this in a two-pronged way, short-term and long-term. And the long-term would also basically be applied, I think, wider, with a wider range, no?
I kind of feel like
Or are
we're
you just
covered.
talking time?
No, the short term I thought is what we have now is traditional training. We do have the 24/7 virtual ability. Long term, I was hoping for a crisis intervention team for the county, but county-wide would also include city, in my opinion,
Right.
for a crisis intervention team. Getting other departments to adopt what we think is policy and going to work in Newcastle is a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
Right. But if other people are doing the same thing, it may become acceptable because other communities are seeing this as, something that could help in a greater level, in a greater breadth. So it may not, be so unexpected. And we can also put in the language there where available, if there are plainclothes police officers, et cetera. So we can put in some type of language like that, I think.
Okay, Jill, Jill's dropped out, but I'll, not tonight, but I'll get this by tomorrow. I'll make all these additions, things. Any other comments about this? There we go.
Of course, I
Good
pulled
work,
that.
Vince.
Thank you.
All right.
Really, really good. So involved.
Very, very in depth. So Chief, you're up next. Semi-annual community outreach program.
Yeah, and we talked about that, and relating to a CAB, I called it the Chiefs Advisory Board. So I put together, an outline of a policy taken from other ones that I've saw across the country. And any thoughts? Did people get a chance to look at it? Do I need to go through it line by line? Anybody want to take a quick chance to look at it now?
Yeah, can you just go over it generally?
Yeah, so I think the purpose really says a lot. Chiefs Advisory Board will consist of members of the community and organizations and should be actively engaged in improving the quality of life in Newcastle. Board members should have an interest in assisting the Chief of Police, the Newcastle Police Department, identifying best practices and offering advice to the Chief on those matters in which will improve transparency and build trust within the community. Board members are asked to provide their perspective on possible impact of certain police policies, practices, training, and program. This feedback is instrumental in providing NCPD with the type of objective input needed to ensure that its mission continues to focus on the most current policing standards and cultivation of community partnership. Board involvement helps NCPD avoid the implementation or continuation of programs, policies, or initiatives that are contrary to its overall missions. So my thought would be, we come up with the board anywhere from 4 to 7 people. We meet semi-annually. We can either talk about policies that are in effect and review them. We can talk about what trends in law enforcement are and talk about, policy implementation, what I'm looking to. And I think the group should have the ability to review it and maybe, research it on their own. And then we come back together for discussion on those matters. My other thought would be that I have, a member of CRE, a member of the business community, somebody from the school, interfaith council, regular members, and give me feedback of what the community's feeling or what the community's thinking or what's come up or issues that are handling, and then go from there. So that's kind of my overview and my thought behind it.
The only real thought that I had on this was almost from a legal perspective. Instead of should, maybe it should be shall, meaning that as a requirement, you have to have someone from the school, for example, as opposed to just having 4 regular people.
Right.
Shall as opposed to should. We should make sure that there are certain groups of people who are always going to be on this committee, this group, in 2 years, 10 years, whatever it may be, so that all the different voices are heard.
My only thought behind that was nobody's volunteered. That was my only fear, but I agree with you.
Right. There's practical realities as well. Yeah, that I recognize.
So I have a problem with these type of groups because I think we zero in and it's always the same people. And I'm not even necessarily convinced that the people on these boards really want what's best for the community. And sometimes it's just, and I'm saying this honestly, sometimes it looks good on someone's resume. So they'll take up the cause. If their heart and mind is in it, we don't know. So I wish there was a better way, like maybe y'all could have like 2-3 open spots where, y'all would put in like applications for actual members of the community to see if they would be interested, rather than just going with like the same people who are like on so many town board, different, things which we have in the community. That's just my 2 cents. I just feel like it's more real when you have actual residents take part in these type of conversations.
One of my, and I don't know if this answers your question, one of the people is people who live or work in the town of Newcastle. So that was one of the stakeholders, for a better word, that I had included. But I'm open to suggestions. It was just a first draft.
Could it be run more like an occasional or not occasional, but every month or quarter focus group of people that get invited to come, representing different kinds of people? And in that way, the commitment is one meeting. And then you go to another group the next time, different set of people. Like that would be a different structure.
What about, I see that there's an invitation. What about if a set number of them were invited specifically, and then the balance would be by application of people, as Joanna said, who obviously are interested because they want to do it? Could there be a combination of that type of joinder?
It's ultimately, this group's decision. So I'm open.
I mean, I like the idea of having it's Martha Jacobs. I like the idea of having let's set a set group and then supplementing that with additional people, because I think you need the consistency of people who kind of have served long term, as opposed to different people every meeting. But I think to Joanna's concern, I agree with her. And maybe the people who are chosen, have to, or people who volunteer, however this group comes about, need to be willing to state up front, I am serving because XYZ. And of course you have to then take people at their word. That they're not serving because they want it to look good on some piece of paper, but that they really are committed to making things better for the BIPOC community in the town of Newcastle. As perhaps that's one of the statements that they commit to. But I do think you need a core group that is there consistently.
And I think that if we have this as a guideline, it's going to, develop further over time. This is working, this isn't working, and I, to John's point, I mean, at the end, I do have an opportunity to remove somebody that if I just feel they're there and they're really not, they're just a name on my committee and they're not showing up or not committing or not doing anything else. I'd much rather have somebody who's involved in trying to help us and help our town.
So this becomes, and this kind of goes to the same thing of like, beyond you, chiefs in the future are expected to have I don't know what the title is, like the chiefs advisory board. All chiefs are expected to have advisory boards, and it's supposed to operate in this way. I think we have to keep that in mind.
So other than a little tweaking, I think overall we're amenable to the concept.
Absolutely. I think it's a great idea.
So the adjustment is that I'd like to take in what Joanna said, the adjustment is that there will be people invited to create different representative perspectives each time. Is that?
My thought was, we get it out in the newsletter for the town, right? And or on my Facebook page, or on the town's Facebook page, and say, hey, we're creating this new, board. Are you interested? Reach out to the chief's office and go from there.
And I think I like Martha's suggestion that they should be interviewed for the position on the board.
Agree.
think that.
And interviewed for what exactly, though? I mean, there's some guidance about what?
Hi, it's Hermie and Charles. I'm sorry. No, it's a combination of what Martha had said and Joanna, where, you know, some people are just going to be there because it looks good on their resume. And Martha had suggested having a permanent board, but having people interviewed to be on the board to make sure they were in integrity with serving.
Yeah, but you know, like to go back to Vince, we have a police chief now in terms of Police Carol, who's like, who's working with the community for police reform. What if 4 or 5 years later, we have someone who doesn't agree with any of this and then just elects a board which is totally against all of this? Then it's going to become an unsafe place for BIPOC people again. So we are back to square one. So how do we ensure that, you know?
I think the answer to that in part is it's not the chief's decision. He can recommend, maybe it's the sitting town board's decision, so that you have more people involved in that process, and those are your elected officials as opposed to someone who's appointed.
There's no guarantee you get a town board that's any better either.
Well, you know, you'd like to think you're going to have at least 5 people.
You should vote.
These are different, but they're also an elected body. So, you know, I think there's a safer mechanism to do that.
Great.
Or as part of that, I guess you have, you know, a voting member from the community. But I mean, you don't want to make it so much red tape that you can't get it done.
Yeah, our community has no problem sharing with the board when they are unhappy with, whether it be the chief or police services or anything. So the board was
Really?
Well, some parts of the community have no problem with it. That's the thing that we're trying to keep in mind here. Some parts do and some parts don't. So on a practical level, what would that mean? Is a sort of like the chief is responsible to come up and set up the structure and, you know, subject to a conversation with the board, is this okay, or something like that? Is that what we're talking?
Remember, we're act as police commissioners collectively, the town board. So even when the even when the chief wants to hire somebody, we have the opportunity and we're required to vet them, you know, so we'll get the information in advance, and then we ask some questions that we think are appropriate. So it's not just the police chief who makes it, and even well, it's not giving me a raise, promoting people. It's on the town board too. So I think that's how you do it. Unless you're suggesting someone is saying we should also have a member of the community, but then how do you pick that member of the community?
Why don't you have the chair of the CRE?
That could be a possibility too. Is it?
They
You
could
know,
recommend
maybe with the
for,
town board, not, you know, not one individual making the decision, but, you know, in consultation.
Just so their voice is heard too. Yeah.
the thing is Chief Carroll's a pretty young guy. I expect his tenure to be long in the town of Newcastle.
Amazing fast, Jill.
And that would be wonderful. However,
Bring up Joe we did on this and hires him away, right?
If we're good to him, he'll stay.
So we're leaving it to the chief to write this into the policy. Is that it? Is it clear? I guess what we're asking.
Well, it has to do with the appointment that seems to be the issue, right?
The appointment and who serves, yeah. Or how it's decided, how people are chosen.
So as a subsect of A in the composition of the Chiefs Board Advisory, do we want to ask the CRE in conjunction with the town board to recommend a majority of the Chiefs Advisory Board?
You know, I was just thinking quick, even maybe if and I think we had in the past, I'm not sure it's been recently, we have a member of the town board that's a police liaison, right? So maybe myself, the head of the CRE, and a police liaison from the board could do the interviewing. Just throwing that in.
Okay.
And then you have
The one thing, Chief, I'm assuming you took this from someplace else, because under number 4 of the composition,
Yeah.
an ethnic relations advisory groups, that seems, does
Not a
not reflect
Newcastle
this
here.
community.
Yeah, you know what, when I saw it, and I did pull it from somewhere else, I kind of right away said, isn't that what CRE is? I don't know.
Yeah, CRE.
Yeah,
So maybe we can
It
just put
is. So
that
that's,
language in
that
there.
should be,
So that's fine, but when I read it, I was like, that's CRE, so, but I just didn't.
yes,
see it.
Yep.
yep, yes.
Just thought it was, like, even if there's
And I
another.
agree with Jeremy. I think it should be the members shall include.
So fine.
My old labor relations days.
So anything else that we want to touch on in this, in Chief's area? Anyone? Whenever I do that, I want to say Bueller. Bueller? Bueller? I think I feel compelled to say
That's
that.
great, yeah.
So seeing no hands, seeing no one, hearing nobody, Jill, I think you're up next with yes, you are, safe church
Yeah.
policy. And then there's a second piece on the ombudsman.
Well, actually, it's the ombudsman is what I did. So I just have to find it.
I forgot to send you the safe church policy. My
That's
apologies.
okay.
Oh, it just says Jill here. I'm sorry, Martha. It says Jill.
Perfectly. Yeah, no, it's perfectly fine. I just have to chuckle because I did what everybody else did. When I captured the distribution list, Tiffany was excluded from every single one of them because she was the sender. So I'm getting texts going, did your chief send you something? And I'm like, oh no. I was like, please tell me you got what I sent. And the answer was no. So I'm like really sorry. So give me a moment.
I actually I included her in my sending. I just forgot to attach it.
Oh,
So she got nothing.
I am so sorry.
So Martha, did you want to have anything to share about it, even though we don't have any paperwork on it?
No, I just am saying that you said something about safe church policy and it like totally went right out of my head after last Thursday night. So
Oh, okay.
I didn't even get it to Jill. So,
Okay.
but I think she did a great job with the office of the, I don't know whether we should call it an ombudsman or community.
Just to throw people off.
You know, I don't think, you know, ombudsman is such an old fashioned word. And I'm not sure a lot of people really understand what that is. So maybe it's, you know, maybe we change it.
I'm happy to have you guys take it.
Or advocacy or something like that, because that's really what an ombudsman.
I am open to changing, though it is an icebreaker in the conversation.
I still can't say it.
And neither did I, clearly.
The community advocate.
Oh, Jesus.
Community advocate sounds good.
Okay. Meanwhile, I'm unable to pull it up on my.
We can come back to you, Julie. We can.
No, it's fine. I just, yeah.
So, Kim and Herman, do you want to, while Jill is looking, I think you're up next, if I'm not mistaken. Or did we, I'm sorry, I see there's no name next to this. Personnel complaint form reporting procedure on the PD's website. Chief, was that just something you were looking into as well? I don't see your name there. No?
Oh, I found the ombudsman.
Chief, you're muted.
Yeah, I think we said we wanted to get that on the actual website, and then we actually rolled that into the ombudsman.
Okay.
I said that right. Thanks, Kimberly, me for it.
The community advocate.
Community, okay. So if you want, I can certainly change it to community advocate. How about that? Okay. Alrighty. So this was twofold from the way I understood it. We understood that anonymous complaints really don't serve the purpose we wish they would serve. So we would eliminate them and instead institute an office of the community advocate. The purpose of it was to create this independent office that would help assist complainants in filling out a complaint against the police. It would sort of be there, sit by their side and basically walk them through it. It would also serve the purpose that if the complainant felt most comfortable with an anonymous complaint, the advocate could file on the complainant's behalf, maintaining their anonymity, and still giving the police the opportunity to get access to the full array of information that the police would need to be able to conduct a full investigation, because as questions arise, they would have access to the complainant through the advocate, be able to ask any questions so that they can conduct their investigation. Also, the advocate can give the complainant an update, a periodic update, so that there isn't this, void of information. Why is it taking so long? It doesn't. So-and-so was out. We couldn't find the witness, whatever the case may be, just keep them apprised of it. And also we would have the opportunity to be able to fully explain to the complainant through the advocate the full findings of the police investigation. So our complainant is advised of the findings. They are in a position of understanding that the complaint was fully investigated. They can ask questions about the investigation, what happens next, the whole bit. And hopefully we walk away with a scenario where a complainant feels that their complaint has been fully and fairly and transparently investigated, and we're able to get to the bottom of it. And so for those of you that didn't read it, that was my general gist of it. I was hoping that members of this office would be volunteers from our greater community, which should include members of the LGBT, and I'm sure I left a letter or two out of there, I apologize, community, the Interfaith Council, and the BIPOC community. And I thought perhaps what would happen is that we would put this information on the website, and the volunteers would have their names listed along with like a little sentence or two about them, so that a complainant would feel most comfortable selecting somebody that they feel that they would feel comfortable with. Thoughts, additions, modifications? You're the moderator.
My question, this is, I think, from wearing a hat as a prosecutor and criminal lawyer, and I know we have some other lawyers on here as well, is it's so hard to make an assessment if you don't have interaction with that person. So, if Jill, you tell me something and I tell Chief Carroll, I tell Joanna or Ivy, whoever it may be, a game of operator, for lack of a better term, is difficult because you can't assess someone's passion, their credibility, what they really saw. So I think it's hard on both sides to ensure you have the right information and to hold the person accountable. So I just think there needs to be a mechanism so that the person who is sharing the information, and they may be concerned and every right to be concerned, or don't want to share who they are, that they understand that there is a little bit of an issue that will potentially arise because that person is not directly interacting with the fact finder.
It's not perfect, but it's significantly better than an anonymous complaint where there isn't.
Yes, I agree.
Maybe there's a conference call where the advocate uses their cell phone number as opposed to the complainant.
I don't want to say disclaimer, but to
I see
encourage somebody to say, listen, you have every right not to come forward. You have every right to make this anonymous complaint. But unfortunately, there are issues when you are not personally involved, when it's at arm's length, that would benefit you and benefit the other side.
Can I comment
Please.
on that?
Yeah,
I get the point, but as you know, as a lawyer, criminal lawyer, you're advocating all the time for your clients, and typically we're pretty effective doing it because there's an interest there. Obviously, I think whoever becomes a part of the available team here would firstly tell the person, make sure that they're comfortable doing the anonymous complaint, and one would always advise them that appealing personally would be the best, but you'll do your best to convey what they're telling you. I don't really see a problem with advocating for another person. I think you can still do it with the appropriate amount of passion. That's just me. Does anybody else have any thoughts?
Well, it brings up a point.
I also think that people, I'm sorry.
No, go, please.
I also think that, if you have someone who can either figuratively or actually take you by the hand and say, why don't we go together and talk to the chief about this? I think that also helps. so that it's not just a one-on-one. And I tend to think, and I could be totally wrong, and I would appreciate it if others would disagree with me to say so, that there is some comfort in numbers, and not being the only one who has to go in and say, here's what happened. I mean, I know how uncomfortable I was going into Chief Ferry and saying, guess what? I got this really nasty letter about the fact that, I have a rainbow flag in front of my church, and that they underlined everything in the Bible that said why I was an abomination. And I would have loved to have had another person go in with me to have that conversation with Chief Ferry, but I didn't want to put anybody else in that position. But I think if we have this kind of an availability for people, it may actually help them to feel empowered because they're not going in alone. And it may be the initial conversation is between the chief and I, if it were me, and then, get his feedback and then go back to the person and say, look, I think it might be really good if we went together because you've got more information than I can possibly relay, and you can relay the emotions that I can't. So, let's do this together. And the person can still say no, and I can still advocate for them. But I think it's a process. And I think that might be helpful for some people not to have to do it by themselves.
I also think it's nice to have someone between the 2 points to explain the process in a very different way that's not as high pressured. So I think that's why a position like this, I know that I would probably direct families to a position like this if it existed, if they were dealing with some really intense family issues and they didn't feel comfortable initially going to the police. I think this would be a really great resource.
Right. And I think to just build on Christine's comments that I think if we take our volunteers from our Office of the Community Advocate and we basically walk through what what is it like to file a complaint with the police? What are the questions that you're going to be asked? Have the chief come in and say, this is why we need to ask these questions. These are the situations that may arise. I need you to be particularly sensitive to X, Y, and Z. That I think it'll be very helpful. It will give the advocates some insight and be able to allow them to be in a position to share that insight with the complainant so that we can move forward most effectively.
Could it, again, just talking generic, chief, not just Chief Carroll, but it could be possible that the advocate goes with somebody to give them some support and then find that this is not going well in the meeting. And I would want the advocate to be strong enough to say, hold it a second. This is not the spirit of what we're here to do. Like to be able to have some authority with the police representative and push if necessary.
I agree with that.
I don't know what that means. Like, does that mean that they have standing with the Newcastle Police, or does that just mean that they're a highly competent advocate? What is it? What do you mean?
Well, I don't think they have standing with the police, but I think that they do have standing with the police. They're the representative. They've been empowered under the system in a sense, but it does take a certain presence of understanding the spirit of what's going on and the confidence to say either in any way they could do it. Like if I were in a situation, I would stop what was going on. I'd call timeout and say, whoa, I think we need to stop this because this is getting contentious and that's really not the spirit of this. And I think that on a human interactional level, the advocate should feel the responsibility to protect the person who's making the complaint because the police wield authority and power, and that's what you're there to do.
I think you're there. So I'm concerned that, do we screen an advocate to make sure that an advocate isn't coming in with their own preconceived notions of certain things.
Oh, I think you should. Yeah, I think you should.
So Joanne and I are here. So I've been listening to everyone speak. And as a BIPOC member on this committee, I'm just thinking, like, can you imagine how it must feel like to want to have like an advocate to go to the police for you? Like, don't you think we need to like talk about building trust and have like better policing than to again say like we can't even go to the police, we need like someone to advocate for us and go to the police? That's what I'm thinking.
I thought it was both. Joanna,
I
I thought
think
it
the
was
whole
both.
point, I think the whole point, yeah, I think that's right. I think the whole point is there, no matter how much trust is, well, first of all, it takes time to build trust and security. And there still may be people down the road who are just not comfortable going on their own to the police. And this is a way to bridge that so that they can at least be heard. And I think that's really important to at least allow that possibility for people who would otherwise not go to the police. This person, while they could advocate for them, this person can also be almost as a liaison and help build that trust. If this does move forward the way it should, and the police department, and I have no reason to doubt because I know how Chief's been, thus far. But this has to, we have to think beyond Chief Carroll. This will continue to build some type of credibility and trust between the people we're concerned about and the police department. So I think it does both.
Yeah, and all I'm saying is that in the description of the advocate, that they need to have the full range of their roles: liaison, support, also advocate, being able to make sure it's safe, like all of it, not just.
Okay, is there
Yes,
something
friendly
that I left
visitor.
out that you want to include? Well, Vince, take a look. So the creation of the Office of the Community Advocate, just strike ombudsman for now. Assist in the filing, a complainant with the filing of a complaint, file the complaint on behalf of the complainant, maintain the anonymity of the complainant if desired, act as an intermediary for the purpose of conducting a complete and thorough investigation, allow the complainant to be fully informed about the investigation after the completion is complete. Tell me what you would
Well,
like.
would it be, if desired, support and assist the individual to make the complaint personally?
Okay.
I think that's important, Vince. I think that's spot on.
And I think that'll happen. I think, hopefully, when the community advocates start working with us, that they'll see that, what, really, we know them. Come with me. You're going to get treated fairly. I hope that's the opinion anyway, and I believe that that's how it will go. Now,
Yeah.
they still may not want to, I get it, but, I'd like to see it that way.
I'm sorry if I missed this, Jill, but have you given thought to like how would we provide training for these people? I don't know if that came up in your thinking. It might just, you're on mute.
Sorry. So I have thought about it. It really is going to depend whether or not there are attorneys that are volunteering for this or non-attorneys, and what, just so that I understand the background of it. But I think that I would sit down with Chief and Jeremy and Harvey and see if we could put together just some pointers, some, general do's and don'ts, so that we don't step on any toes.
And Kim too, but
Yeah, it's fine.
And that begs the question, though, as you asked that question, Ivy, because if it was Harvey, Kim, or me, or someone else for that matter, and you start hearing something that may not be suitable, do you put on your personal attorney hat and say, "Do not repeat that, do not say that"? But I'm not your attorney. I'm not want to get too caught up in it, but you start. You could.
Yeah, I am a smidgen concerned about this.
You need to have guidelines, really strict guidelines about what.
Yeah, I didn't even think, when I was thinking of it in my head, I was thinking of a social worker.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking of an attorney either.
But that was just my initial.
Yeah, I'm the same. You know, I was thinking less of that it's more of a layperson, as it were, than a lawyer. Not that I have anything against lawyers. A lot of my friends are
No,
lawyers,
she,
but
Sure.
you
I
know,
don't know. I
she
don't know how
says
much-
that, but
You know,
I guess you know, one of the things that you know, going back to something that Joanna said, you know, I think that losing sight of the fact that we have to do this, it's important that we not lose sight of the reason for doing all of this, right? And that it is to ensure that we are a safe community, that where people, whoever they are, feel that they have a voice and that they are heard and that they are respected for all that they are. You know, my comment before about wishing that I had had someone to go to Chief Ferry with me, you know, is keeps bringing me back, because that was so embarrassing for me to have to go and talk to this complete stranger who I had never met, because I was new to the community, and to out myself to him, even though I was already basically out in the community anyway, or the smaller community. You know, there's a lot to unpack in that. And Chief Ferry was quite wonderful about it, but you know, I didn't know at the time, and so it would have been helpful to just have someone, you know, that I could talk to, that I could, you know, identify. I didn't know most of the people in the town yet, so I couldn't like call Jill and say, "Hey, Jill, is the police, you know, is the chief going to be okay, or is he homophobic?" You know, I had no way of knowing. So, you know, I think that's it. We just can't lose sight of why we are having these conversations, and the needs that we need to ensure, and the voices that are heard, and people are protected.
Is there
I don't
any,
know what made me say that, but I just felt like I needed to just remind me, perhaps, and maybe others as well, that the, you know, the reasons.
with, is in the training aspect of this, is there a need, let's say this person is a lay person, or is there a need for them to understand, like, if somebody comes to a complaint and you're getting the indication that what they're really saying is that they feel the police officer has committed a crime, would that change this in any way, versus a complaint? Or is it just the same? And if the person says this and you're the intermediary, you go to the chief and say, "This is what happened," then the chief goes, "Wow, she's really saying the police officer committed a crime," or he is. So is that a consideration for the training?
I would think so.
I don't know that that's really a consideration, because the job would still be the same. You know, the purpose would still be the same. And obviously, you know, some of us would know what might rise to the level of a crime, or allegedly, or not. But the bottom line is, it's conveying the information to Chief Carroll. He certainly is going to know if it's a crime. And, you know, that advice would then be passed back to the complainant. So I don't know that that's really necessary, because the person is not going to be, quote, representing them, you know, as a lawyer, just as an advocate for them, and quite honestly, a companion, you know, if that's what they need, more than remaining anonymous and having that advocate for them.
Yeah, what worries me more, Harvey Lowe, by the way, I think what Jeremy alluded to, let's say you're playing this role and the person going in is going to admit to something that could be a crime. You know, then put on my defense lawyer hat, I say, person, you know, stop, you know, and take them outside and, you know, have to sort of sanitize the conversation, or stop that. So I think that's a greater concern from my point of view. Presumably, if someone is going to accuse police officers of a crime, the chief is going to look into it and take the appropriate remedy, whether it's a criminal act or whether it isn't.
So is there then an important thing in this stipulation that the community advocate is not a lawyer, is not acting as your lawyer or anything? Is that important to say, just to be clear? We are not, this is
I
not
think we
that.
would speak to our counsel and see what kind of disclaimer that we would take in.
It would have to be. It would have to be.
you know.
I don't want to I wouldn't want to be sued.
Right.
My liability
I-
wouldn't cover me.
Yeah, no lawyer is going to volunteer unless that's in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Well, Martha, that's one way of making sure that's only social workers.
No, that's not true. Lawyers would
No, I
volunteer
don't
for this,
want-
but
I'm not your lawyer. I play one on TV, but I'm not a lawyer.
but definitely they have to be told that if this person happens to be an attorney, they are not representing you in that capacity. I just, that has to be clear.
Yeah. And we will take and do this. I'm sorry. Get
No,
Joanna.
Thank you. So you know how we earlier discussed about when we were talking about mental health, and we discussed about having resources to help with mental health. How about when we form this advocacy group, we have different tabs in which we, have a tab for mental advocacy, and then we have a tab for like people who would advocate for people who wanted to go to the police. So it looked more holistic and more, how like we were building better community with these resources, whether they be social workers, mental health advocates, lawyers, anything which, would tell us community that this is a safe space for everyone. Because while we are only discussing BIPOC at this police reform, when Reverend Martha spoke, my heart reached out to her, because can you imagine feeling so alone and not feeling where you could go to? So, we need to make sure like all areas of community feel safe. Emphasis is on BIPOC, but also the LGBTQ kids. It really doesn't matter.
I actually thought our group was everyone. I thought the purpose of this group was everyone, not just BIPOC. But
Okay.
Right. I specifically included members of the faith community and LGBTQ.
It's so funny you say that, Johanna, because I had the same reaction when we were talking about putting together a list of social work volunteers at the beginning, that we should think about what are all of the different kind of community volunteers that we are identifying that we want to have, sort of step in and get involved. So I fully support that notion of creating kind of a hub for different community sort of
Resources
that we could engage.
Okay.
Pardon me, everyone. I smell a little smoke from my toaster. I think I just want to go check. Please. I apologize.
So,
Jeremy,
Did you hear the smoke detector go off?
Yeah. Wow.
Hermione, one of the things I wanted to share when someone mentioned earlier about not having the full information or not being able to answer questions that might come up, advocating for that person. One of the things I had someone do was to just write a very detailed account of what transpired. And when I thought that there were some gaps in it, I basically questioned her and had her add more details. And, at one point, even offering to write the report and then have her read it and affirm it before sending it in. So that's another way. That was how I advocated for that person in the past.
That
That's
sounds
helpful,
kind of like
thank
a
you.
policy and
That's
procedure,
helpful.
like the representative should somehow prepare a written report. Do they have to? Is that a good idea to do versus
Right.
memory or notes or?
That's it.
Or maybe give guidance and aid in preparing the initial complaint or something like that.
Right. And I've done multiple things. I've gone into Chief, we've walked into his office, Kimberly and I. And on another occasion, I did it in writing. I advocated through writing. And I think it's all about, what that person is comfortable with. Because if someone is reaching out to an intermediary, that person is scared. So now you want to play into that person's comfort zone, right? So we can accompany them, we can write the report for them, we can have them write the reports and review it and fill it out, flesh it out, before taking it in. I don't think it's a one size fits all.
So are we okay with this for now? Do we have enough here to present something? I
Yeah.
think we do. I think we've kind of covered a lot of different issues.
Right. And we're going to work with the presentation of this as part of a larger community resource offering, which I think is right. I think that gives a holistic approach to it and sort of minimizes the chance that it be misconstrued as oh my gosh, people don't feel safe enough here to even walk in by themselves to the police station. This is all just part of our community support. So I think that works well. Okay. And I'll speak about the training and things like that, see if I can get some more details on that.
All right. So then let's move on. Then we're going to, by the way, it was the air fryer, so we're okay, everybody. We're moving on to the community survey, I think. Is that what's next? Am I not mistaken? Because we're in terms of the website, Chief, you were taking care of putting what we needed up, or do we need to discuss that here?
Oh, the policies and procedures that we were going to be posting.
I think that's,
Is that what that was?
That's kind of living, meaning we can always add as we go. I mean,
Right. Is there a limit, Chief, to the number of sections we can put up under the current license?
So that's more of a question for Lyle, right?
Okay. Yes.
Because department, it's the townwide website. So how much?
Okay. Okay.
the easy
Are
thing is
there-
the website? So
Yeah. I'm sorry. Are there specific policies that the group would want us to see posted in addition to what's there already? Chief, do you recall off the top of your head what's up already? I know use of force is up already.
Yeah, use of deadly physical use of force, I believe. I've heard the personnel complaints I thought was good. Another hot one a lot of times could be police pursuits, some kind of like sensitive topics, but I'm open to suggestions. Well, I mean, it's a group's decision ultimately.
Right. Are there other sections that the group would like to see up? The problem is that the policy book itself is voluminous. And if we put the entire thing up there, no one's going to look through it. They're going to really be lost, even if it's bookmarked.
Maybe stop and frisk.
Okay. Good. Thank you, Harvey.
Is the intent is for the community to be able to understand how the police operate? Is that the intent?
Transparency?
Yes.
I guess.
It's available for you to see, and whatever you want to know, you can. That's the purpose.
This is this is the training. This is what's permitted under
So
our
it's-
guidelines.
Excuse my ignorance, in this, is there like a table of contents that you could just send us, Chief, that we could just look through it? We don't have to look through the whole manual, but, or, guidelines, but just because there may be something else like a stop and frisk that we might think, oh, this should be out there too. Because off the top of my head, I can't think of what policies you might have.
I can do that.
Manual.
Yep, I can absolutely. I'll print it out in a PDF form and send it to everybody. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
The nice thing about our online policy, and I don't know if I explained that earlier, is that officers have the ability to view the policies on their phone or on their in-car computers. So it's kind of like at any time they have those resources available to them.
So that means it's already online somewhere else, but not on the website. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I only have so many licenses that I pay.
Oh,
for.
I see what you mean. I got it. Yeah.
All right. I'm closing out of my screens. I apologize. All right, community survey. Kim, Hermia?
Hello. Hello. We put this together. In all honesty, we were a little, we weren't really sure exactly what everybody wanted with respect to this recommendation. This recommendation kind of took us out of left field. So I apologize. It's pretty basic. And quite honestly, in our conversation tonight, I realized this was really focused on the BIPOC community. And I think we're going to need to also just insert some other language for the community at large. But essentially, this is really just to identify why a survey is good for our purposes and how it benefits us. And quite honestly, how intricate and involved it is, even though it seems so simple. To get to that simplicity requires a lot of knowledge in how to formulate surveys. So I'll jump right to the recommendation. I mean, first of all, is there anything, did everybody have a chance just to look at this small draft? The recommendation is a survey professional be retained on a periodic as needed basis, because we have not identified how frequently it's needed. I don't know that it's necessary to do it. It's certainly not necessary, I think, to do it every 6 months, nor necessarily every year. It really is on an as needed basis, because as Ivy said at the last meeting, it depends on how our goals are going. You know, if we've achieved them, and then we turn those into, you know, we convert to new goals. So that's going to take a matter of time, and we're not sure. This committee will have to determine when the next survey is needed. So the recommendation is a survey professional be retained on a periodic as needed basis, as determined by this group from time to time, because we're not going to necessarily have set meetings on an annual basis or whatever, to design a survey that elicits from the public information concerning the effectiveness of the ongoing efforts in the area of racial equity. And this is where we should probably insert other community issues such as LGB, et cetera, and to target areas that may need further improvement. So it's pretty simple. I wasn't really sure how involved you wanted me to get. It just, my understanding was that we wanted to have a basis to take on a professional when needed to help draft these surveys. So, any comments?
It seems pretty prudent to just have something we can refer back to. I guess one question I have is that you were this committee. I'm having a blast on this committee, by the way. But is this considered to be like something that we might call back to 6 months from now, or it gets reformulated with new people? Like this is going to be a standing committee?
That was the impression that I had, but maybe I'm wrong. Tell me.
That it's a standing committee?
I didn't have that impression.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it was just for this particular purpose.
Yeah.
Maybe we can go back to the well now that we've all been pulled up.
Because I feel like Jim's chief advisory board or committee is that body now after this is
Right.
done. That's what I was, that in my
Okay.
head, right?
Yeah, I
Okay.
agree. Yeah, I think so. And then they would be the ones to take and make recommendations as to survey topics going forward.
Okay. So change the reference to this group to the chief advisory board.
Sounds
Yeah.
about right. Yeah, it sounds about right.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in the recommendation, yes.
Right.
So I'm wondering in this where the departmental survey comes in. That Jill just reminded me in the text, because I couldn't remember where we were with that survey, that the chief is creating that survey for the officers. And you know, is that something that is going to happen on an ongoing basis, like, you know, once a year or something? And where do those results get vetted?
I think I missed something. An officer survey, I mean, among the police department or the
Yes.
community? Okay,
No,
I'm
among
sorry.
the police
Somehow
department.
I missed that. I apologize.
Or should that be a different?
My idea was that it was a separate issue to be developed by me, maybe in conjunction with a professional or the law enforcement agencies, but it was something that I would, if the group thought it was a recommendation, the group would put forward that we do it and do it semi-annually, and then I would be in charge of
Tasked with that.
tasked with it, and whether the results are reviewed with the town board or internally, I'm open to suggestion. But
Okay. Well, maybe that's one of those things that this advisory board could also be included in terms of what the outcome is, what the outcomes are.
I think
So
the
then that is
advisory board
separate.
is going
Okay.
to need to get the results of these surveys because then they need to be evaluated. So
Wait,
it would make
no.
sense, right?
For the chief's internal one?
The chief advisory board
No.
would
Separate and apart. The survey that the
Yes.
chief is doing among his staff to see how his staff is doing, the chief's advisory board would get that?
No, I'm confused. I'm confused what the purpose of that survey is and if it really is relevant to the greater group. That's what I'm asking.
I think it's relevant to me as a review of how we're doing.
Right.
It.
Yeah, that's internal. I don't think
Yes.
that, okay.
And it doesn't
Yeah,
even,
no, that's
it
separate
doesn't
and
have to
apart
be
from.
this group's- it doesn't even have to be part of this
Right.
group's recommendation. It's something I think is a good idea.
Right.
So
Kimberly,
Yeah, I think it should be separate.
Okay.
I
That's fine with me.
wonder, because I'm gonna, when I go on my part, there's gonna be a piece of it that if we move forward with the looking at potentially some data collection around police stops, that you need someone, at least if you look at the research, that can analyze that data for you. So I wonder if in part of the language in your piece, not specific to any one particular issue, but you could consider writing some language in there that as the Newcastle Police Office Department needs, they can leverage a data analyst, someone that has expertise in analyzing data in order to enhance their performance and review it. Because it's gonna bridge to different areas of what we're talking about, I think. I don't know how people feel about that.
Yeah.
So it's not specific like a survey, even though language like that's in there, but someone that maybe they could hire to do data analysis around a whole bunch of different issues using a bunch of different methodologies in collecting information.
So while I think that's a great idea, and I really like the idea of a professional, I think that when we start to use words like hire and we like loop ourselves into budget, then stuff like this becomes a challenge. So maybe when we have resources, again, we can put in a resource as a, data analyzer, just so it gives us, it kind of helps us in our mission to have a more doable than put in, hiring, because then they'll come back and be like, oh, we didn't do it because we didn't have any money for it.
I don't.
So you think it would be used as an excuse to not do it?
Yeah, I mean, for better.
Okay.
I
just want to make sure I understood what you were saying. Okay, thank you.
I just think it's really important, and I think that we saw it on the survey that just went out, that there is an art to the way the questions are presented, and they are created in such a way to elicit a proper response, and then you need to be able to interpret the data that you get. So I have to tell you, I'm thrilled we were able to get the survey out. I'm a little cognizant of the fact that we weren't professionals in drafting it, and I'm a little concerned because I don't know who's going to be able to interpret the results that we get. So I'm hoping that they, are all pretty self-explanatory, but
But
we'll
I
see
guess
what
the
we get.
question, I think, to pick up what Christine was saying, is that it sounds as though in the policy there does need to be something that said, there needs to be a recognition that some funds have to be available for professional services in this way. I think, isn't that what you're trying to say, Christine, that
Yes.
that in there?
You're right. I
understand.
failed to put that in here.
But
You're
it's
right.
not-
There
it's
will
not
have to be.
gonna be isolated to survey development, because if the group decides we're gonna move forward with collecting data at traffic stops, you need that level of expertise involved in analyzing that information.
Mission, right, right, exactly right.
Yeah, I want to say I appreciate what Johanna's saying. I mean, we've just come off of the experience, right, of going through the CRE's sort of action plan and all of the recommendations that they came up with, which were so thoughtful and well conceived, and then we kind of slammed into the wall of COVID and budget realities, right? And so I think sort of coming off of that experience of having to, you know, take a hard look at what were we able to prioritize, and as much as possible, you know, how much can we kind of work with volunteers and do as much in-house, and this, you know, so I'm very grateful actually for the reality check that is you know, our budget right now. And at the same time, I think this is an area where at least from the conversation that we're having right now, it's abundantly clear to me that you do need professional expertise. And so, you know, if we can sort of, you know, I can certainly put a pin in that for myself when it comes to budget time. But I think that that's the direction that this committee is recommending. And, you know, certainly this is an area that is a top priority for the town and the town board and for the police department. So I think, you know, I don't want to go crazy, but on the other hand, I want to try as much as we can to make the funding available to support this.
This also picks up something that Hermione has kept harping on, which is in the recommendations, kind of going up to the state. The state needs to make some funds available so that this can be done professionally. Like, we shouldn't leave that out and kind of keep that on them. I don't know what it costs to have somebody do something, but we're not the only principalities got to be wrestling with this. So,
Oh, certainly not.
yeah. So the state could have a grant program for something.
And not to take from this conversation, but can we have a sidebar topic where we can come up with ideas on how we can help Jill with the current survey, which is out, and see how we can, you know, so she's not so worried about analyzing the data?
I'm happy to share the data results with the group. What I'm concerned is that I don't know who in the group is qualified to take and interpret the data.
It's going to be a data party. We have no idea.
It's okay. I added to the list of things that keep me up at night. It's fine.
Well,
It's
you know,
fine.
and actually, quite frankly, maybe there is someone who is a member who lives in Newcastle, who does this for a living, who might be willing to kind of help out, you know, or at least give some guidance. I mean, just because the survey was not created by a researcher doesn't mean they can't take the data that comes in and look at it and make some sense of it for us. I did that in my previous life. So, you know, I think researchers, no, I haven't done, I mean, I did the research, someone else did the data. I
was all
can't do
excited.
that.
Analysis.
Numbers are not my thing, but
I watched
you know,
a YouTube video on it once, I think.
you know, but I do think that, you know, who knows, there may be somebody who lives in Newcastle who would be willing to kind of help out a little bit. If we don't ask, we won't know.
Well, and I think the other thing that we discussed last week is that this initial survey is a little bit to establish a baseline and create kind of a threshold that we would then use to inform the sort of future surveys that Kim and Hermione have described here. So if there are areas of concern that we then need to delve into more deeply and, you know, determine, is it statistically significant, the difference between the response for, you know, X community versus Y community, you know, that will kind of enable us to understand where we need to dig deeper.
All right.
So does anybody have any remarks and comments of changes that I need to make here?
I think other than
changing to CAB.
Yeah.
And obviously I think I need to add a little bit more I have racial equity in there, but I should also bring in the other groups as well.
The
Make it a little bit
LGBTQ,
wide. Yes, exactly. Make it a
LGBTQ
little
community.
wider. Yep.
And a budget line consideration of some kind is the other thing.
Yep. Yeah. Now I don't have what that budget line, how much that should be, but there'll be an indicator there that a budget line is going to be necessary for this.
And then
and
just on the recommendation, right, to expand it from being a survey professional to a data analytics professional or a data analyst capable of developing surveys, creating key performance indicators, tracking metrics, and developing, reports, or, whatever the kind of right verbiage is there.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm going to have to find that out. But yeah, no, I get it. I understand. So I'll add that. So it won't just be a survey professional. It would be somebody who's all encompassing. Okay.
All right. We're good to move on. The next category. All right. So I think our next category, Chief, do we need to discuss this again? Do you have the samples that we want to discuss, or how do you want to handle this for now?
I think, you mean with the internal survey?
Yeah, kind of touched on it a little bit already,
I
but
think the group was fine, even just taking it out of the recommendation, and I could just do it internally, for myself going forward. That was what I took from it, but maybe
I thought that we're not going to we don't want to have this as, we should totally remove it. That was the decision, and maybe I misunderstood it, but okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really, it's something that the chief is doing himself. So
Okay.
I think.
I thought it was just separate from the community survey. I didn't mean taking it out. Okay. All right. So then the next would be, what complaints of misconduct should trigger town board review? Ivy can start, or I can start. What would you prefer, Ivy? You're the boss.
Or I'll go ahead and talk a little bit about what I sent around earlier today. So we talked at the last meeting about the role of the town board and whether the town board could be involved in reviewing police misconduct complaints, sort of serving as maybe kind of an additional level of review on top of the role of the ombuds person.
Community advocate.
And so, we went back and Jill helped with this. We went back and we had a conversation with Labor Council, and as Jeremy alluded to earlier, the town board actually serves as police commissioners, so we already play a role in disciplinary proceedings. And it was the advice of our Labor Council, and Jill, feel free to jump in here, but it was the advice of our Labor Council that the town board should not play a role in reviewing misconduct and complaints prior to the disciplinary proceedings, because it may sort of
Taint.
What's the
Taint.
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 There's the word.
Yeah.
That it may taint our ultimate judgment, because we become the arbiters at the end of the hearing and the sort of finders of fact. So based on that conversation, Jill and I sort of each worked on our pieces, and she kind of beefed up the role of that ombuds person to sort of fill that need. And I concentrated on the sort of second question, which was around the role of the town board in sort of oversight of the police department itself, and increasing kind of transparency regarding police practices and processes to sort of engage the town board and help to educate the community with regard to the kind of community policing goals of the department. And so the recommendation here, it's really pretty simple then, is just to hold semi-annual audit review meetings with the Newcastle Police Chief Carroll, to review departmental performance. So that would be kind of starting with the chief working to develop some kind of key performance indicators for the department, which could be published on the town website and then sort of checked in on a semi-annual basis, and then kind of using that as the framework for a larger conversation with the town board on this kind of semi-annual basis to discuss just kind of recent activity over the course of the past 6 months to get sort of an update from the chief on the activity of the department and any kind of pressing matters that are going on around town. Oftentimes the town board knows about these because to the extent that people complain to the police, they often complain to us too. Sometimes they come to us first and then we turn around and go to the chief. And sometimes they go to the chief first and then they come to us. But, you know, to be able to kind of check in on what the kind of pressing matters before the community are on a regular basis. And that, you know, having these kind of regular check-ins, and they would be public meetings, town board meetings. So the public would be invited to come in as well and to ask questions of the chief as well. And this would just kind of help to educate the community around the pressing issues of the day and to increase the public's understanding around law enforcement policies and procedures.
So the only thing
I have one question. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jeremy.
The only thing I would add to that is I spoke to Labor Council as well, and as Ivy said, we would be conflicted out. We can't understand, we can't get a telling of the facts or the evidence or the allegations because ultimately we're the arbiters. And then I asked, well, you know, what is the discretion that we have to compel the chief of police to share information with us in terms of what should be brought, what constitutes a violation that should rise to our level. And what he said is that Labor Council said that the chief of police has complete and total discretion. So in theory, the chief of police could raise something to the level of our review for showing up late once. Obviously, that's a waste of time. But the police chief has complete discretion, and there's just that conflict that's always going to exist that he can't or she can't, depending who the chief is, come to us and then share something about our opinion about it because ultimately we're going to be the arbiters of that. So there's nothing much to add on top of it other than discretion is wide and for the chief of police, and there's that conflict issue that we have as a town board.
So what I don't understand in the arbiter thing. So the chief has a personnel matter or a complaint, and he proceeds within his discretion to deal with it. Let's say this is not a criminal thing. This is something having to do with behavior and okay. Your role in the board as arbiters of what?
So ultimately, because it's the police chief's discretion, if he, in this case, Chief Carroll says, you know what, there needs to be a penalty beyond what I'm doing here, you know, internally. It doesn't have to necessarily be a crime, but there needs to be raised. And that's, again, it's his discretion to say, this is a violation of our rules and regulations, and I'm not going to deal with it internally. I want the town board to take a position and potentially sanction that person or not. So then it would be presented to us and we'd make a determination, although we passed an order that there's actually a third party
Hearing officer
who would be a fact finder, but ultimately, if I'm not mistaken, Jill, it's just really just a recommendation to us, and we ultimately make the decision. But that sort of intermediary body hears the evidence.
So this allows the police officer to have a hearing. So the police chief says, I want the sanction that's beyond my normal thing to you. Does that allow the police officer his or her opportunity to present their case to you? Is that what you mean?
Well, there would be, but in this case, because what we voted on, there's actually a third party, a hearing officer or an arbitrator, if you will, who would hear that evidence, and there would be a little mini trial, if you want to call it that.
Okay, I see.
It's a full trial.
You're right. Yes, it's a full trial, a mini trial. It's not
The tribunal.
It's not a jury, right.
Yeah.
So it's a hearing trial, and ultimately, if I'm stating it correctly, he or she makes a recommendation to us, correct? Jill,
Yes.
isn't that the way it worked?
Yes.
That works. And I could put this in perspective. I think the last hearing that we did have was about 35 years ago.
Yeah.
Well, but the future is always in doubt, you know.
There may be one coming in the next year.
Right. So then the other question I had is like, okay, so the community advocate represents something to you, chief. You deal with it in the way, you know, there's some discussion, but the person wants to remain anonymous. And so there's something. And so they find out that you've made a decision and they can't live with it. And now they've decided they want to go to the board. That's an option for them.
They can always go to the board and make a complaint. We have public comment. People can come in.
Okay.
So that this situation will not impact that, because it just sounds a little contradictory. Okay.
No
Because
one's right-
that's
no one
exactly
gets-
what I was going to ask about.
Yeah, Kim, no one gets their right stripped because of what we have here, so they can still
Yeah.
pursue other channels.
And I suppose you can, Jeremy, you could get clarification, but I would imagine though that you could ask me based upon with advice of counsel on an individual complaint if charges weren't being preferred.
Right.
Be a little difficult though, because depending, unless it came to us independently, because you couldn't tell us the
Right.
fact of something that
So
should have been.
if somebody wasn't happy with my investigation and they made a separate complaint to you,
It would have to be separate, right?
right, and then I found the person was exonerated, the claim was unsustained, you could ask me something like that.
Appreciate it, right?
The conflict is really when there are possible charges pending.
I think what this really just highlights is the importance of the interview process that the board has to undergo with anyone who, once the chief decides to retire in 30 years,
Yes.
who is going to replace him and how, I think that maybe that's something that the town board can perhaps look at as you move forward to kind of assure members of the town, right, that anyone who's hired in the position of the chief of police will have to meet certain criteria, right, and be able to, to demonstrate in whatever way that they are not homophobic, or whatever it is that so that the people in the town can feel reassured that in the interview process with whoever might be considered to be the next chief of police does meet certain criteria. And I don't know, maybe that criteria already exists. I don't know, but it just seems like I think that would be helpful, and part of the, if you excuse the term, transparency, that would be helpful for people in the town to just know that is on the board's mind, right? As the board vets and interviews someone for the position, there are certain criteria that the board expects from that person. Just throwing it out there for you guys, because you don't have enough on your plates already.
Is that something that needs to be codified somehow or documented?
It would seem to
How
me
are you
that would
going
be
to hold
something
up?
that the board might
It's
want
something,
to.
it's questions that the board asks on a regular basis when we go through an interview process.
And maybe that just needs to be made public,
Written
right?
down.
Well, it's a personnel interview, so I don't know that it's going to be made.
Well, right, but I mean, in terms of here are the qualifications or the qualities we're looking for in a chief of police. So that people in the town get educated about what it is that that the town is looking for when they're hiring someone.
So in other words, let the town know about our standards.
Exactly.
Yes.
I just think it's helpful that people hear that there is, that there's an awareness on the part of the members of the board that, when we interview someone, here are the things we're going to make sure. So, that the person understands this is not New York City, that this is, Westchester County, and that this is this community, and, and here, my guess is whoever the next chief is going to be will, similar to Chief Carroll, come out of the force, in 30 years, of course, when the chief retires. So, but I just think that would be helpful for people to just know where, what the board is thinking. I think it's always better to kind of have that stuff out there, because had I known that if the Chief Ferry, was not homophobic, it would have been much easier for me to go to him by myself, right? So, and I can only base it on my own experience. So had I known that, it would have made my drive from the church down to the police department much less anxiety provoking.
Let me just jump in real quickly and
that
say,
those kinds of standards with regard to, the characteristics and the ethics and morals and values that we're looking for in terms of our chief is a standard that we're looking for across all of our officers. So, by the time that we're looking to promote someone to become chief, they've, come up through our department and have, at each step in that process, we are looking for those values. So, I guess all I'm
That's good
thinking
to
is
know,
that
Ivy.
it doesn't start when you get to the level of chief. It's something that's intrinsic to our entire department.
Right.
Right.
Then maybe that's some of what needs to just be known. And maybe it is known, and because I don't actually live in Newcastle, I'm not aware of that granularity of it, but
Could I just throw a couple fun facts out for you? So, Chief, I'll put you on the spot. We have 37 officers. How many have you hired?
Oh, I've hired 4, but I've been involved in the hiring process of close to 20.
Okay, so 20 out of 37. The chief has,
Maybe even higher.
Chief
Maybe
Carroll, all right, has had a hand in hiring. So between Chief Ferry and Chief Carroll, we have a very young department. And so when you are concerned and you express the concern that, we're only one chief away, Chief Carroll's department is being groomed and is being trained is in his image. These are the standards that he sets forth. These are the qualities that the town board had selected in a police chief. And it trickles, it starts from the top, but it trickles down. This is the training that they've received. So I'm hoping that that gives the community a large dose of confidence that it's not just the chief. When you remove him, you have his lieutenants that have been trained under him. And I fully expect that in the next 5 years, you'll probably see the entire department are people that Chief Carroll has literally had a hand in hiring and selecting and then training.
But is it a rule that the chief does, is it a rule that whoever the new chief would be in the future definitely comes through the ranks of Newcastle? Is that a written rule? Or is there a possibility that a chief can come from another jurisdiction?
That would be,
and I think, yeah, I'm just saying, I think that's what Martha is kind of referring to. If it's a rule that they're coming through Newcastle, that's one thing, but I don't know that that's a rule. It just happens to be a habit or a trend or a tradition. It's not a rule.
I don't know about that, Chief. I think it's actually a rule.
I haven't heard of that happening in Westchester, but I don't know that there's a specific rule preventing it.
We can ask Labor Council. I'm sure he'll know.
Well, I'm happy to get you an answer, but I have to tell you that it's never happened in our department.
Is that even legal to exclusively hire from within the ranks, promote from within the ranks?
Civil service,
Is
yeah.
that's civil service?
So it is legal.
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. Okay, thanks.
Hermie, and do you mean through the ranks of the Newcastle Police Department? Or I mean, maybe I'm just confused. I think the answer is we don't know if there exists a rule that each chief has to come up through the ranks of Newcastle.
Right.
It wouldn't be Newcastle, it would be their department. So I believe that there is a hiring preference. I'm happy to check it out for you. I didn't mean for this to be another area that keeps you up at night. I'm trying to explain that that's why I feel comfortable as a resident of a 30-year resident of living here, 35, however, 40, God, it's too long.
I wonder if it's covered in the Westchester County Police Act, but I just can't remember.
Yeah,
Labor Council.
But even if it's not a rule, I mean, I think that a person that's applying for a job has a resume, has a reputation that probably precedes that person. And, if there's a bad person applying for the police chief job here, I think that we might find out along the way. So I'm less concerned about that. And I don't know, actually, I don't know if it's legal to just restrict it to people that go through the department. I think you kind of have to put it out there. And look, companies do it, right? Companies do it. We had Chief Bratton in the NYPD. He came from Boston,
different.
Right. I guess the reason why I raised this, I guess.
I feel like maybe we're
off topic.
to try
Not-
to
not-
have
not
this
not only off
conversation
top,
without the benefit of counsel.
Oh, gosh, and
I
it's
have all that
7:58.
Sorry.
back as a to-do, we can come back and give you that information, but I don't think we should speculate because there are actually hard and fast rules that we have to follow around civil service. So like, let's
Right.
take that and we'll bring it back.
Right.
Simply asking that it just be out there more of what the level of, never mind.
I get it. No, I get it.
You got it. You got it.
So I feel badly because we had one more recommendation, and that was from Christine Ackerman, who did a really thorough job of talking us through the demographics.
You think I can go really quickly just through this? And then,
I would say no. I have a lot of comments and things about this. So if we go quickly through it, we still have to talk about it more.
well, I know, I just to give an overview of what it is, like what I shared with the group, or are we going to have to hold a separate meeting just to talk about this particular item?
I'm not sure we have to hold a separate meeting just for this item, but we didn't get
Include
to
it.
our list, and we'd certainly
Well,
would.
we might have to push the schedule back.
Yeah, this is important. Christine, what you did is very important, and a few minutes is not going to do it.
Well, just so you know, we have the 11th, the 18th, and the 2nd of March. So February 11th, February 18th, and the 2nd of March when we ratify. So are you suggesting that we squeeze in another meeting or start a meeting 20 minutes early or a half hour early? Maybe that just makes sense.
Well, the problem is that the next, I'm sorry, Chief, go ahead.
Yeah, the next one was scheduled to be a draft presentation with community feedback. The one after that was to be the final draft presentation and then ratification. So we're going to have to add another step in at least if we don't present tonight or finish tonight.
So
I wonder too if it makes sense. I mean, to go an additional half hour, I mean, rather than plug another meeting into the calendar for this particular topic. And then maybe people can submit additional comments around the topic if we feel like there's more that needs to be said.
I'm in favor
I
of that.
actually, you mean going another half hour now?
Yeah.
I don't know about other people, but it's
My family held off dinner for everybody. All right. I just think this is going to be a large topic to discuss. I really do. Am I the only one?
No, I'm with you. This is a big one.
Thank you. This is huge. This is a big one.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, we're looking at data. We're not looking at a recommendation.
right.
So
And I think
maybe we should do is just start the meeting earlier next time at the
well,
extra time.
the problem, I think what the point was is that we were going to have something drafted on the 11th. So that's our next meeting, a draft plan. So we need something in between.
And I don't think it's right for one person to make a recommendation on this particular issue. I mean, I have some thoughts, but I mean, every other issue that we've been brought forward, you can flush out, but I think this one's the most complex, right? So for me to come out to this group and say, okay, this is what I think we should do, I don't know if that's under my purview, but I do have some thoughts about how to move forward that I would definitely consider sharing. I'm just concerned about where to fit in another meeting between now and what needs to happen next.
So do you want to do it for the 4th? Is that a date that's available for people?
Well, I think we can work on the other pieces in the interim. So it's not as if this will hold everything up. Did I lose you?
No, we're here.
No.
That was really awkward.
Sorry.
No, I agree. We do have enough to work on.
So I can do the 4th. Christine, your calendar is probably one of the most challenging. So, and you're the one who's done the research. So are you available the 4th?
Even if it's an hour meeting as opposed to 2 hours.
I
This
can
is just really an important topic.
I can definitely do an hour on the 4th.
Okay, and what would that hour be? 6 to 7?
Yeah, I can definitely do 6 to 7, and I probably can go over. I can probably go a little bit over.
Why don't we just call it 6 to 7?
Okay.
If this is the topic.
I
And
also,
so, I'm sorry.
I also, so I attached the documents that I looked at, but I feel like one of the things I wanted to share is if pieces of information are missing that we think we need to have a fuller discussion. I don't mind researching that. You just need to send me an email saying, since I've gone through these documents, is there any other, I think this, I need to know about this piece, or did you look at this piece, or was there anything on that piece that you can add to the guidance document and I could push it back out to the group? So if you're wondering about something else that I didn't throw in there, let me know and I'll see if I can find it and
Got
then
it.
put it in the document. That's what I'm trying to say.
I got it. Okay,
All right, so we're gonna reconvene on the 4th at 6 o'clock.
right.
Anything
For
you
an
need to
hour,
say to
and
Christine
in the
advance?
okay, so in the meantime, for those people that were making little tweaks to their sections, if you could just make them and then forward them to the group, but please make sure that Tiffany is CC'd on it, just so that you know, we have everything together. And we will send this out to you complete, with the exception of Christine's piece, by Monday, so that the group has a chance to look at it. If we get it beforehand, I mean, it's Thursday already, so I don't think we're going to get it by tomorrow. But, you know, let's do it so that we can get it, so Tiffany can get it out to the group on Monday. We can all review it, and we can, if we can have the rest of the recommendations set, then we'll just have the hour discussion on Christine's topic, and we'll be able to complete it. Okay, Christine, do you think that's reasonable within the, since you've done most of the lion's share of the research?
I think what would be most helpful, if people think there's information missing, if we do that work between now and the next meeting. So at the next meeting, we're not saying, did we look at this or did we look at that?
Yeah, and also if maybe people can just put down on paper some of their questions and issues, that would be really helpful as well. When we have concrete things to deal with, we're far more focused and efficient. Because I really do want to move this to a public conversation. Great.
All right, super, and thank you, Tiffany, in advance for a lot of work.
Putting it together, yes, thank you. It makes it that much harder when I don't send her anything.
Thank you.
So sorry.
All right, everyone. So signing off. Thank you, everyone, for tonight, and until next time.
All right, sounds good. Thank
Be
you,
well,
guys.
healthy.
Be well. Bye.